Good morning, everyone. Excited to see you. We'll give participants and audience 2 more minutes, and then we will go ahead and get started. So 2 minutes to get logged in. I see we've got some colleagues of the panelists out there, someone from Pennsylvania. We're excited to have everyone on. This is going to be a great conversation. We'll give people about 1 more minute, and then we'll go ahead and get started. All right, it's 11:02, so we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you for everyone for joining us today this Post-Secondary Pathways webinar. We'll be discussing redefining student success to represent today's post-secondary students. We have a great panel with us today, including Chancellor Randy Gardner from the Ohio Department of Higher Education, Dr. Tiffany Beth Mfume from Morgan State University, and Dr. Kathy Peltier from EduCause. Just a reminder that we are streaming live on Facebook, as well as we'll post this on YouTube. And if you want to follow us on Twitter, you can hashtag postpathways or join us on Twitter at the Hunt Institute. With that, I'll go ahead and get us started. We know that student success has traditionally been defined as this traditional student graduating from high school, entering post-secondary education, and persisting through graduation. But we know that traditional definition of student success doesn't account for many of today's students. Students today are often working full or part-time. They often have additional family responsibilities, and they may even have financial burdens that they have to cover during this time. So with so many different students and represented on campus, we know that work has to be done to truly define student success. And if we silo these definitions, then we're leaving students behind. And so this webinar is featuring 3 great experts that will tackle this big question of what does it mean for a student to be successful in higher education in 2021. So I'm excited for us to dive into it. With that, I will go ahead and get us started. Our first question is for Chancellor Gardner. Chancellor Gardner is the 10th Chancellor of the Ohio Department of Education, Higher Education, excuse me, where he oversees the state's 2- and 4-year universities and colleges, as well as Ohio's technical centers. He also provides policy guidance to the governor and the Ohio General Assembly. Chancellor, we appreciate you being here today with us. Can you tell us a little bit more about how the state of Ohio defines student success and the various opportunities and equity gaps that exist for your range of students?
Well, thank you very much for inviting me to be a part of this. I've gotten to know over the last several months more of the good work done by the Hunt Institute. You were in Ohio, we visited, and I was on a panel there, and really appreciate the opportunity to be back with you to share a few things. I'm not an expert. I'm just a hired hand working in Columbus, trying to help out a little bit. And I've been doing that for about 36 years. So in terms of the General Assembly and the governor's cabinet. You know, when you ask the question about success, I have typically tried not to define it from a state system standpoint, that success really is what it means to each individual student and family. But having said that, with a variety of institutions we have in Ohio, I oversee 14 public universities, 24 regional campuses, 23 community colleges, 74 private or independent institutions, and career centers and technical centers. So it's 135 plus institutions fundamentally. And so it'd be difficult to have a specific definition. But I do think something that I value very much, the role that post-secondary education, whatever that might mean. It means short-term certificates and credentials to some people today. It means associate degrees or bachelor's degrees, and all the way through our professional and advanced degrees and research institutions. But I do think we're trying to, there's still a challenge, especially in the last almost 2 years now under COVID, to get people to focus on the real value and opportunity in higher education and post-secondary education, which is still of significant value, I believe, to whether someone's going to be truly successful. If you think about successful in getting the kind of job they want, to support their families, to elevate their careers. And so that's really the state's job to try to frame that and form that. We did in my testimony in the budget this year, we identified that we were fourth in the country in the value of increasing attainment by 5%. If we did that with a combination of associate degrees and bachelor's degrees, we would actually provide $1 billion more to our state budget, increase state tax revenue, or decrease social spending in the budget. And so there's room for the right and the left to support higher education attainment. How are we doing? Well, enrollments are down for most in the state. FAFSA completions are down, although we put $3.5 million of federal GEAR money into bolstering our FAFSA efforts. It's starting to pay off. And then in the mental health area, we had some real challenges in the state, elevated to us through students, through a Chancellor Student Roundtable that Governor DeWine was on. And he heard those concerns about mental health. And we were the first state in the country, $16 million in assistance to colleges all throughout the state to help them build their mental health and counseling services during this pandemic. Those things typically impact, you mentioned equity. Some of those challenges actually are exacerbated by underrepresented populations, socioeconomic challenged students. So we need more wraparound services. We need more holistic support for students. And so when we look at success, we have to even be better and work harder just to not go backwards during this challenging time. That's what's frustrating about higher education right now. But we've seen some successes, some new things, budget initiatives. We even have something called Choose Ohio First, which is a STEM-based scholarship program. We embedded support for underrepresented populations in that RFP. So we are trying various ways to do this. It's challenging. I'm looking forward to learning more today. One of the reasons I signed up to do this was not for me to impart much to the program, but for me to learn and to take notes and learn from others. So thank you for the opportunity to join you. Appreciate the first question, and I look forward to the program today. Thanks.
Absolutely. And thank you for that answer. Sounds like there's a lot going on in Ohio. And I think the part that with me the most is that you said there's room for everyone in this conversation. And there is, everywhere from accountability to ensuring the funding is the right source and the right revenue streams. And so I appreciate that. And defining student success is difficult across campuses. So I look forward to us talking more about the services and wraparound services that are happening at an institutional level. Great. Next, I want to remind the audience before we move to our next panelist that we will take Q&A at the end of this webinar. So feel free to use the Q&A section of the chat box, and we will get to those questions towards the end. But next, we'll turn to Dr. Mfume, who is the Associate Vice President of Student Success and Retention at Morgan State University. She manages student and parent orientation, first-year advisement, financial literacy, and a multiple number of other programs aimed at increasing student success and retention. Dr. Mfume, can you talk to us more about who the students are you work with and what are some of the barriers they face towards success?
Yes, thank you, first of all, for inviting me. It's an honor to share the panel with such distinguished guests and experts. I am as you said, the AVP for Student Success and Retention at Morgan State University in Baltimore, Maryland. Morgan State is the oldest of 4 historically Black colleges and universities in the state of Maryland, public HBCUs in Maryland. We have 8,500 students, 8,516 to be exact, this semester. And about 7,000 of those students are undergraduate students. Of those 7,000 undergraduate students, we're still 80% Black African-American students of color. Depending on how you ask the question, we're still a 50 to 70% first generation, depending on whether you ask if a parent completed college or did a parent attend a 4-year institution. We have students who are mostly Pell eligible students, low income students. Usually about 60% of our students are Pell eligible students. So by many of the traditional measures, whether it's first generation or students of color or low income students, we also have at least half of our students who are going to need some developmental math course, about 60% of those of our freshmen. And so by those traditional measures, we know our students are going to need help and support when they come to us at Morgan State University. So there are a number of challenges that have only been exacerbated by COVID-19 and students having equity when it comes to everything from bandwidth, whether it's internet access, being able to have the correct devices, the correct environments. When we were working from home, we've been back in person this semester. So there are a number of barriers that our students face that are associated with just their lifestyle and their incomes, not having all of the advantages and opportunities perhaps that some other students have. Even when it comes to beyond just their status with their financial aid and being able to clear financially every semester, we have students with food insecurity, who face housing insecurity, students who are parents, students who have responsibilities in their families, students who are really contributing to the well-being of their families at home, either by working or by taking care of siblings and babysitting. So our students need us to understand what their needs are. And that's why we have such a long list of supports that we offer to students to try to help keep them on track, to try to help meet their needs, both in the classroom and out of the classroom academically. There's such a direct connection between students' financial stressors and their ability to focus in the classroom. So they're very connected. To help students keep on track academically, we have to also be able to acknowledge and address their needs that are not academic. And that's what we've been doing at Morgan State University. We've had 11 consecutive years of a retention rate above 70%. And we were a little nervous with COVID this year, but it was great to be able to know that we were still able to bring back 70% of our students. And we are at a period of tremendous enrollment growth. Our freshman class this year is almost double that 100% growth last year, which makes us an outlier when so many enrollments are down. Our enrollment is up at our highest enrollment in the 154-year history we have at Morgan. We actually have an entire leased hotel, the Morgan Marriott, we like to call it, in addition to our 3,400 spaces here on campus. So there are a lot of challenges and a lot of supports that students need. And I know we'll talk about this more, but we're seeing also students just telling us about their anxiety, their trauma, their depression, both related to COVID and also that they had before COVID. So looking forward to our discussion today.
Great, thank you for that. And congratulations on continuing that streak of retention. Those are huge numbers, so it's exciting to hear. I recently was listening to a student panel, and one of the students said, when my bills were paid, I got good grades. And I think that's something that stuck with me the most, because that financial burden for so many students is such a big component of it. So thank you for all the ways that you all at Morgan State are helping students overcome those. Great. Well, I surely want to bring in our last panelist, Dr. Peltier, who is the Director of Teaching and Learning Programs at EduCause, a nonprofit association whose mission is to advance higher education through the use of information technology. Dr. Peltier, can you tell us more about the work you do at EduCause and how technology impacts student success?
Absolutely. And I also extend my thanks and gratitude for being included in this panel. I'm really already energized and have lots of thoughts bubbling from Dr. Mfume and Chancellor Gardner's opening remarks. So looking forward to the rest of the conversation. As you mentioned, EduCause is a nonprofit association seeking to advance higher ed through the use of IT. And I want to insert the strategic in front of IT because we really focus on leadership, strategy. Much of our work is less about the technologies themselves that you would plug in and more about the people and process and culture and how we all need to work together across our institutions to have a really strategic approach to technology that best serves our students. And we serve about 100,000 individuals. We've got about 2,000 member institutions and provide resources and research and especially peer connection and conversation as we come together to solve the wicked problems of higher education. And so getting to your question about how technology has impacted student success and retention, I think I would really double down on that strategic in parentheses and even take away the parentheses because while technology certainly offers affordances to our institutions to be able to serve students in a more strategic or sustained or integrative, personalized, proactive way, both in and out of the classroom, you really have to think about the kind of 35,000-foot view of the campus technology ecosystem and think of that as something that really needs to be intentionally connected and deployed so that students and faculty and all of the support staff have all of the access to the right information and access to services that are just in time or even before just in time to really proactively help students. And when you think about that technology ecosystem, it includes things like your source student information system that really is the kind of bedrock and foundation of data on your student population. You'd want to think about your kind of core academic advising systems that might help with credit transfer or education plan tracking or early alerts, those kinds of things. But then also with an eye to the technologies that provide more of a holistic set of supports for students and things like, Dr. Mfume mentioned the financial stressors that students have. So how can we help our students really manage proactively their finances, both from a financial aid perspective, but just as kind of a human living in the world, et cetera. And certainly career support, like Chancellor Gardner mentioned, as students go out into the world, into the workforce, and certainly the mental health systems as well. So we really need to be thinking about these systems as a system of systems instead of just individual things that we plug in and turn on. And really, because the currency of all of these systems is data, if those systems aren't talking to each other, you really are limited in the way that you can kind of have this holistic view of a student and support students where they need help the most. And you're also really limited in the way that you are reaching students who might be in a situation that requires care and sensitivity in working with them. And so making sure that your staff are also equipped to understand implicit bias or recognize how the data coming from the systems is also kind of human driven because of the algorithms that are also created by humans. And so that kind of data literacy around understanding what our data are telling us, even if you have connected systems, you need to be able to make sense of the data in a sensitive, equity focused, ethical way. And then finally, just thinking about our institution capacity and having these connected systems or systems of systems really enables us to really avoid duplication of effort or kind of stepping on each other's toes as we're seeking to serve students in the best way possible. And so I feel like the data piece is a really critical conversation to have on campus when we're thinking about what technology can do for students and the way that it has that we have been we have access to so much more data now through both our academic courses going online through the pandemic. Many continue to be provided in an online or hybrid format, as well as many of the support services that also went online because of the pandemic, but may also be continuing as well. And so really paying attention to those ethical issues related to the use of data, your data governance, the things that may feel less sexy and exciting when you think about serving students, but are really critical to be able to get in front of students that might need support and kind of this whole person view of how we can help each individual student meet their own goals.
Yeah, thank you for that. Adding that strategic portion, I think, was really important to the technology use, because it's not enough just to provide those resources without having the ability to understand what you're using them for, and then the way that connects to what you were saying about data, making sure that I think we live in a time where we collect a tremendous amount of data, but don't understand how to really use it to benefit our students. And so thank you for naming that. Chancellor Gardner, we're going to come back to you, but I wanted to just hit on Ben's question in the Q&A. Ben asked about that increase in educational attainment you mentioned, and you said that it would bring about $1 million of financial impact from an EduCause study. I've seen something similar for nationwide from the Georgetown Center on Workforce and Education, where they're estimating that the U.S. is losing out on close to $1 trillion with the T dollars in GDP every year from the equity gaps that exist in higher ed. So I just wanted to name that as we came back and just give you a chance to respond if you wanted to add anything else to Ben's question.
Sure, just a minute or so on that. What I had testified to was the EduCause study, and it identified, I thought a balanced approach would be to take half of the 5% increase in attainment, half of it would be at the associate degree level and half of it would be at the bachelor's degree level. And that combination over a 2-year period would have added $1 billion of savings, not to the economy, but to the state budget, even greater to the economy. And of course to individuals, because we know that wages are higher, unemployment rates are lower, healthcare outcomes are better. I'm giving you my higher education value speech. But there's a great value. And so what I tried to impress upon the members of the General Assembly was that there is something for the right and the left in whether you want to cut taxes more, you want to increase social spending additionally with that savings and invest in other things. There's a lot to bring people together in higher education if we can find ways to understand why attainment, degree completion, certificates and credentials of value added, industry recognized, these kinds of things provide, I think, real value. And I was trying to elevate the higher education budget and what we do based on that study, and to look at just the financials, not the other things that I think are also very valuable. I don't really like speaking about higher ed on just economics, because there are other things. There are some degrees people get that aren't necessarily significant financially, but they're of great value to individuals and to people in the state. So we don't want to dismiss those either. But from an economic standpoint, that was the point we were trying to make, and the Ithaca study was very helpful to us.
Great. And I think you hit on some parts that'll flow right into the next question. But talking about finances and everything, we know Ohio was one of the first to go to such a large outcomes-based funding formula. And so can you talk to us a little bit about how that formula encourages the various institutions you have to support student success?
Okay, yes. In fact, there are hour-long seminars on our SSI, our state share of instruction formula, you realize. So I'm going to have to cut that down by just a few minutes, aren't I? Actually, what I would offer to do is, if anybody wants more information, there's actually a document. I'm holding a document in my hand here that was presented a couple of years ago at a national conference. And I am not the architect of our state share of instruction formula. It was actually generated about 9 years ago by a previous governor. I was in the state Senate at the time, and I wasn't all that for it, because it was really significant reform, and I thought it might even be disruptive. What we've learned in Ohio is significantly increased graduation rates, but we've still done a pretty good job of maintaining access, because sometimes when you put a really strong outcomes-based formula where you're valuing graduation rates and course completions, maybe institutions find that some students wouldn't be as strong of a good bet in terms of getting those success points. And we don't want to keep people away from higher education that need additional support services, may not be as likely to succeed, but can succeed if we provide more effort and support. So you don't want to make it not accessible to people as well. So the bottom line, I'm not going to go through a lot of detail, but basically what we did a number of years ago, and we've maintained it today, is that for our four-year universities, we provide 50% of the funding comes from degree completion, 30% from course completion, and then we have doctoral set-asides and medical set-asides as part of that. But very significant outcomes-based, not just generating enrollment. On the community college side, it's pretty similar in that 25% is degree completion and 50% is course completion, and then we have additional success points. Embedded in these graduation and course completions are things dealing with equity, dealing with access weights, and specifically, for example, on the degree completion side, we look at academic, financial, age, race, and first-generation students. We embed additional, and I don't really like to use the term at risk. Any child or student that's not fulfilled by an institution of higher education or a K through 12 school is at risk. But these are additional challenges that we acknowledge in our funding formula that cost a little bit more to support students. We embed that in our formula. And so we do that as well with our community college sector. And I am glad to provide, if people want to email us or be glad to provide this document or whatever we can from Ohio, glad to share. But the bottom line is, and the interesting debate, we're going through an additional consultation. What we also choose to do in Ohio is we get our 23 community colleges and our 14 public universities together, and they actually try to provide consensus to us. If there are any changes in the SSI formula, we basically require consensus agreement. And sometimes there's division inside one state university might be much more significant in terms of access. Others might have a different kind of demographic. And you get that in the community college space. We have one community college with 25,000 students. We have others with 980. And the difference in the rural nature and urban nature. So it's not an easy debate. But we went through that. This is not something that I did as chancellor, but we are continuing to maintain it and support it. And the bottom line is, I think it has encouraged institutions to be even more mindful of graduations and helping students succeed, finding ways, even the mental health area. The institutions welcomed it partly because, partly because they care about students, but also because they're going to have fewer successes if students can't persist and stay on their campuses and become graduates. So all of that is to suggest that Ohio is glad to share our experience. And if others have experiences too, we're glad to learn from you too. But I'm glad to provide this for you and the Ohio experience on outcomes based, and just let us know how we can help. I hope that covers it well enough, but I know out of respect for time, I know we have other questions. So thank you for the question.
Thank you for that, because know how deep we could go into outcomes-based funding. And I just want to note my colleague from the Hunt Institute, Julia Arns-Hoffman, dropped the link in the chat to the Ohio State Share of Instruction website. So feel free to check that out. But I think, Chancellor Gardner, one of the things so important to what you said is, how do we make sure we embed equity into these outcome formulas? Because if it's not done right, it can make those gaps grow wider. And so I really appreciate all the work Ohio is doing in that area.
Trying. Thank you.
Absolutely. All right, Dr. Mfume, would love to come back to you. You talked to us a little bit about how great Morgan State, how well Morgan State has been able to increase retention rates and maintain those retention rates. And I know you've put a lot of different programs in place, but can you tell us why they've been so successful in increasing retention and success?
Yes, thank you. I appreciate the question and the acknowledgement of our greatness. We accept that, but we're doing the best we can. As Chancellor Gardner said, we're just here trying to learn and trying to promote the success and well-being of our students. We've also experienced, I have to say, an 18-point increase in graduation rates as well. If you just look at predicted graduation rates on household income alone, our predicted graduation rate for the 60% of our students who are Pell eligible if in the state of Maryland is right around 17% in 6 years. And we have increased our graduation rate. The 2005 cohort rate was 28%, and our 2014 cohort rate was 46%. So we've been pushing along, point by point, and it hasn't been an accident to see the overperformance of where you expect students to graduate at a rate of 17%, just based on that one critical factor, again, which is just income. And then you're able to push them out at more than double that rate. And we have a long way to go. Nobody likes to hear a number like 46% and feel good about it. We want to see 80, 90% of our students be able to finish. But the thing that helps us so much is, and I'm so glad EduCause is represented here, we've really been able to leverage technology in helping us spend the time that we need to spend with students at the right time in their matriculation for the right reasons, with a lot of record keeping and accountability and transparency. So pretty much from the time a student is admitted until the time that they graduate, from matriculation to graduation, we are tracking their progress, their academic progress, their bill, if they're registering on time. And what we do is, when we see that you haven't registered during your priority registration time, then we have a person that reaches out to you to assist you with whatever challenges you're having with registration. When we see that you have or have not completed your FAFSA on time, someone reaches out to you proactively to assist assist with FAFSA. When we see that your bill is not cleared, we proactively reach out to you to ask about payment plan or to offer you institutional aid. So pretty much we don't leave it up to students to self-identify when they think they need help. We have so many milestones that we know are directly correlated to completion and success. So our technology helps us to stay on track, to know that these are the students that are, struggling, like I said, with FAFSA, with bill clearance. These are the students who haven't been advised. These are the students who have not registered. These are the students that are off track in their degree program. I just couldn't even call all their names of the vendors and partners that we've been able to establish with the help of some funders as well, who gave us seed money, startup money to get these tools on campus. And now we're maintaining them independently. There's really so much to be said about leveraging technology when you have so many students that need so much support. However, it's the people at Morgan State University, my team, who work so closely with students. The technology cannot stand alone, right? The technology is only as good as the users who are able to activate that technology in the best way at the best time. So all of our programs are about students, again, proactively being communicated to about the milestones we know lead to success. And one other factor is it's usually the same person. So we've kind of moved to a case management approach so that students, I have the same team reaching out to you about all these different issues. So you're not seeing a different person who's this, it's the same old folks. You have a person that's your freshman orientation teacher that was the same person that was here with you when you were here in the summer before you started. It's the same person as your first year advisor, and they are tracking you to make sure you meet these milestones. So it builds relationship. Again, the technology is a key piece, and our students just feel seen. They feel seen because they don't have to navigate our bureaucracy and all of our inside baseball acronyms and deadlines. It's so much about higher ed that is counterintuitive. And so we're making those changes to make the processes more fluid and have more synergy, but we also have people to help you navigate those processes and meet those milestones and stay on track.
Great, thank you for that. That connection, both for the technology, but also that human interaction. I think with COVID, sometimes we have thought we can do so much online, but sometimes it's that sense of belonging, that talking to someone face to face, the familiarity of, hey, I know this person is looking out for my best interest. So really appreciate you saying that, because it takes an individual approach to the students. And so thank you for that. All right, well, I want to remind our audience that we do have our Q&A box open. So if you have any questions, I've got one final question for Dr. Peltier, and then we will move on to the Q&A session. But Dr. Peltier, we know one of the barriers to student success is simply locating the support services they need. Can you talk to us more about how online student support services and the program similar to that support student success?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I would also just double down on what Dr. Mfume just described, that that it really does take people, and the technology can really help the individuals on your campus know who to reach out to and when, and having that consistency of the advisor that you've known through all of your milestones on campus, that really is critical, whether your support services are delivered online or in person. But in terms of online support services, I feel like we're hearing from many students that once they've gotten a taste of online advising or online career center conversation or even online mental health services, they don't want to go back to face because it is so much more convenient and so much more, it's so much easier to engage in those services without having to perhaps find childcare for your kids or figure out how to work around your job schedule. We know that increasingly our student population in higher education is the new traditional, where our students are older, they tend to be working and caring for children or parents. And so kind of working around the students' needs is really important as we think about offering so not only online or hybrid course options, but also student support options as well. But similar, I feel like I'm the downer of this conversation. The cautionary note is that, clearly the pandemic has laid bare the digital divide that affects so many of our students. And even though institutions are working to mitigate issues of access to broadband or devices by owning either loaner devices or hotspots and that kind of thing, this still continues to impact our students, and it's something for institutions to think about as they consider offering longer term online student support or online courses. And certainly it's not sustainable for institutions to continue funding hotspots or loaner devices. I have a little bit of data from a couple of our studies with students that we've done over the past year or so. We did a student study in April of 2021, asking students about their experiences with technology, and we found that so this was a year after the pandemic had started, but still nearly 40% of students struggled to find an internet connection to meet their academic needs, and it really highlighted that unstable housing is a key factor in students not having access to that consistent high quality internet. And so again, thinking about how do we get in front of and help students with those issues of financial resources, mental health, et cetera, is really critical when we think about any services, but certainly as we think about moving into online resources. We also found that it's not just access to broadband, but also access to devices with enough computing power, as students struggled to run all the apps that that were asked of them, both in their courses and their support, even in kind of an advising situation where the institution might be using an LMS, but then you want to go on a Zoom call, and then there's all these other apps. And so really being mindful of the student's ability to run all of these amazing tools that you might be wanting to offer them and be successful. I also, one of the things that has come out of that for EduCause is that we have been working with faculty and student support offices to really encourage the low tech approach, where when you're using, working in an online class or delivering online support services out of class, how can you offer the lowest bandwidth option that's still pedagogically sound or sound from a student support perspective, so that you're not prohibiting access to students who might have those limitations of bandwidth or devices, as well as thinking about accessibility for students with disability who require assistive technology to access those kinds of resources. And so it's an interesting kind of mindset to think about, technology has so much potential to provide access, but then you can't get too fancy with it, because students really, they can't use it if they can't access it and kind of run the full benefit of those technologies. We did another poll in November of this year, so pretty recently, one of our quick polls, again with students, and we found that students are really continuing to bear the burden and responsibility of finding creative solutions around accessing support services or courses that are online. And so, for example, they often use multiple devices when completing tasks that are needed of them, so that they're not lagging on their, maybe their Chromebook, et cetera. They use their mobile device at the same time. And we also see that both in the classroom and in terms of support services, students really appreciate flexibility and being able to access and engage with their activities with their campus in different formats. And so, again, cautionary tale to something that has a lot of potential, because I feel like, I don't feel like, but we know through talking to our students in our institutions that having access to services that don't require a student to be on campus or don't require kind of reducing the barriers for the student to be able to get to the advising appointment or to get to the career services appointment, or thinking about other technologies that can, if you're deploying them strategically, you can, for example, a chatbot might be able to answer routine questions that a student might have, also help to answer questions students might be embarrassed of asking of a person, and then have the person follow up to continue the conversation with the student, for example. So I think that we have so much potential with online support services, but we're really just at the cusp of figuring out what are the, kind of robot versus human. What are the things that the humans need to do? What are the things that the technologies can offer? And how do we really, again, keep the student at the center and make sure that we're recognizing that well-intentioned effort might have unintended consequences on the students that we're really hoping to help. And then I guess the final thing that I'll say is that I really love Dr. Mfume's description of how there's such a systematized approach to recognizing when a student might need assistance and getting out in front of them and calling them, or reaching them in whatever way the student wants to be contacted. Because I know from my years of experience on the campus that simply having the resources doesn't necessarily mean that the students will come to them. And so really being able to track that student's progress as they're progressing towards their goals, and point them to the things that really can serve them and allow them to be successful in reaching those goals. So I think we have a lot to learn, but there's a lot of exciting potential, and a lot of great examples like Morgan State that are leading the way, and in kind of combining the technology and the human efforts in student support services.
And that's great to hear. And I appreciate you acknowledging the challenges, because we'd be naive to think we're going to roll out all this technology and not have issues from connectivity to broadband to bandwidth, all of that. So thank you for naming that. I'm going to, Dr. Peltier, there was a question posed in the chat. You mentioned this survey of students. They're just asking what the population of students were that you surveyed. Are you able to share just generally what that sample size and sample was?
I would be happy to. Why don't I grab the link to the survey and I'll put that in the chat. I'll share both the quick poll and the student study that was a bit more comprehensive. And then the information about the sample is at the very bottom. So I'll find that too and put it in the chat, but I'll post the links to the surveys themselves as well.
Great, thank you so much for that. We do have a few questions that have came in. I think we'll start with the first one, and I will direct it towards you, Dr. Mfume, and then I'll give both Dr. Peltier and Chancellor Gardner a chance to chime in if they would like. But one of our attendees asked about wraparound student services, and they asked specifically about funding for it. And I'm going to twist the question a little bit, because I'm curious, Dr. Mfume, how do you all process through the additional costs that various wraparound services have? How do you pay for them and make sure they're sustainable throughout the time?
Well, we have been very blessed to acquire some very strategic grants at pivotal points from partners, the Lumina Foundation, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the Maryland Higher Education Commission, and others that have given us just that initial seed to plant, going back as early as 2012 and then 2014. And then we've had almost every 2 years, we've gotten a bit of seed money that we've been able to use toward building out our support services. And then they really do pay for themselves, and you're able to maintain them with every point. And we've all done these studies to realize every point that we increase our retention or graduation rates, how much more tuition and fee revenue it generates. So getting the initial seed funding, we've been able to do through a number of sources. And even our president has set aside funding before we got any grant. We had some data to look at the number of students that were stopped out at our university in good academic standing who had already accumulated 90 or more credits. The data was so compelling. It's like, what do they need? And what they needed was micro grants. And we found that there were students stopped out for $800 or $1,200, that $800 or $1,200 in institutional aid that he set aside without any outside funding. He gave us $50,000 the first year and said, use this funding, to bring these students back. They're still within their cohort window of 6 years. We can still push them out the door. They're in good academic standing. And so that money, that was the year we saw a 2-point increase in graduation rates just based on that one initiative, just being able to offer these small grants to students who are already seniors. And so how we're able to do it is really having compelling data and arguments to show that if we were able to do, to have more institutional aid or be able to have early alerts or whatever program that we're advocating for, the data makes a compelling argument to a funder or even to your own president that this is the right approach. And then once you've tried it, then you have more data to show that it was effective.
Great, thank you for that. And you named the emergency grant aid and it being, small micro grants. And I just want to echo that. We were just in Virginia doing some work and they rolled out emergency grants last year. And I believe the average grant given out was $87. And so these are not large grants that are covering full tuition. These are students that are having a flat tire that's keeping them from being able to get to work, or they need someone to cover the babysitter for the day. And so it's these small things that are keeping students from being able to persist and ultimately be successful. So I appreciate you naming that. Chancellor Gardner, I wanted to give you a chance. Is there anything you wanted to add about the way you help schools fund wraparound services in Ohio?
Well, one of the questions or one of the chats that I glanced at was about the CUNY, the ASAP program in New York, and that Ohio did participate in that. And we actually then put in our state budget additional $5 million this year for what we call Community College Acceleration Program, which tries to accelerate the graduations. And those are wraparound services, supports. So that's something that was really important to our community college system in the state, and we were involved with. The other thing that we haven't really talked about much, but that we're really focused on in Ohio is also the supports for adults who want to come back. And I noticed one of our panelists mentioned that as being important. We have something we call College Comeback in Ohio, and it's not a state mandate, but it's an expectation that every campus will have some type of partnerships with other institutions, or at least in their own institution, to bring back students who might have that $800 or $500. And we actually have a new strategy that's already taking place in Northeast Ohio. 8 institutions have bound together, and they're going to basically find ways to share transcripts, to knock down the debt, maybe even to resolve the debt amongst the 2 institutions, combined together to bring that student back to wherever they choose to go. It's pretty exciting. And we know that the demographics of the Midwest, maybe not every state that's watching this today, but the demographics of the Midwest in terms of high school graduations are not good. And if you're going to grow your state economically, you've got to have additional efforts to provide support and access for adults who have stopped out, paused out, and will come back. And we also had something in the state budget, not my initiative, but State Senator Serino in Ohio, called Second Chance Grant. And it was $2,000 grants for people who have stopped out over the last 5 years, been gone for at least 3 semesters in a row, and we can encourage them to come back. And those are grant programs that we're up and running right now in Ohio. So it's just so much an all of the above approach into trying to serve students, whether adult students or the wraparound services of the community college level that we've been engaged with. But those are just some things that come to mind in terms of trying to address that question. And I've learned some things from our other panelists, and I appreciate that opportunity. So I guess we'll stop there. I could say something about one other thing, default rates are going down, and they're partly going down because there's been some of this federal money, a lot of assistance out there, and some of our institutions have done a great job. I'm hoping that we don't take our foot off the gas in terms of debt issues and supporting students, because it looks like things are getting better, and maybe that's a temporary support system that's necessary, but we've got to continue to do more to help students. So those are some rambling thoughts this morning.
I appreciate that. And, I think it makes a world of difference, particularly when 50% of the the funding that flowed in from federal relief funding had to go directly to students. And to see where students use that money really shows us where they need support. So thank you for sharing that. I think we've got time for one more question. So what I'll do, I know it was originally posed at Dr. Mfume. I will start with Dr. Peltier and then come to you, Dr. Mfume, and then Chancellor Gardner. I'll close with you for any final remarks. We have about 5 minutes left or so, but Nancy Campbell, one of our attendees, asked about overcoming the challenges of keeping technology updated so that it doesn't negatively impact interactions with students. So Dr. Peltier, can you talk to that first, and then we'll come to you, Dr. Mfume?
Yes, absolutely. And I think even just the awareness that you need to do that and pay attention to whether it's updates or working with your solution provider to make sure that you're aware of any new features that they're releasing. That's really a huge part of the battle is that awareness. One thing that we talk about a lot at EduCause is the importance of integrative leadership and working across the campus collaboratively between the IT department, the academic departments, and any of the other the student support departments, and making sure that your IT partner can be really a strategic partner in enabling that attention to and caretaking of your technology so that they don't become so outdated that you're negatively impacting your students. And so making sure that you're building those relationships and that your IT partners are aware of the goals that you're trying to meet, any of the challenges that you might be. And I'm assuming that you're not from IT, but if you are from IT, that then certainly work with your functional partners. But that collaboration and open conversation and really having that kind of your compass point at the students' experience and student success is really critical to be able to manage the financial investment, the human resource investment, and any of the other kind of culture and workforce aspects to keep your resources, to keep your technologies updated.
And I'm sure others will agree with me when we transitioned to a virtual model. Suddenly, quite a few of us became members of the Geek Squad and trying to troubleshoot issues. So yes, I think what you're hitting on is spot on. And we've heard of lots of institutions, rolling out ways they can maybe go into the community and do some of that IT troubleshooting for folks and don't necessarily have to come all the way to campus. So thank you for sharing that. Dr. Mfume, just in about 90 seconds, anything you want to add to?
I think it's important to remember that technology in student success, there's no end game. You never really just check the box or cross it off the list. You can expect perpetual change and innovation. And so that's going to be part of any technology you bring on. You expect changes, you expect updates. However, I always encourage my colleagues and peers at other institutions, don't let the technology drive the strategy. Let the strategy drive the technology. All of our technology partners want to tell you what the tool can do and push all these new features on you, but what are you trying to accomplish? Keep your goals and your campus culture in mind and let your strategies drive the technology and not the reverse.
That's powerful. Thank you for that. We'll have to keep that in mind. Chancellor Gardner, just want to give you a chance to about 60 seconds for closing remarks if you have any.
I only get 60 instead of 90.
Yeah, I can give you 90.
I'm just kidding. I'm totally kidding. No, let me say this. It's difficult for students sometimes to pivot. It was difficult for institutions as well. And so we took some more of our federal money that we got. We prioritized it toward increasing the gigabyte capacity at our institutions. We had 40 different institutions where they had only 1 gigabyte of access, so it slowed things down. It made it much more difficult. And we provided support so that we could raise to 10 gigabytes every institution in the state, private and community college, 18 community colleges, 22 private institutions. All of our 4 years were already at that point. So that was of great value. And so we pulled that together on an institution basis to make sure that the technology could work, that students could access and download, and it really was of significant help. But again, the federal needs, the federal dollars helped create this need that was always there, but it got exacerbated by the challenges of going so much online and so much virtual. So that's what we did in Ohio again with those dollars, and glad to share.
Thank you for that. And just to sum us all up, I think today's conversation has been incredibly powerful. It shows just the way defining student success and the way students interact and experience higher education was already fundamentally changing before the pandemic, and the pandemic only heightened those changes. So just want to say thank you again to our panelists to come in to discuss this. Apologies to the attendees that weren't able to get their questions answered. This seems like a conversation we're going to have to continue. But I just want to share with you really quickly what's coming up at the Hunt Institute. We've got some other programs coming up in December. And then, so you'll see on your screen, we've got a homeroom webinar with education leaders from North Dakota. This is going to be a great conversation where the state superintendent of public instruction is bringing in her student cabinet that she's created and really trying to uplift voices in student decisions. And then on December 16th, we've got a partnership with DigiLearn where we're going to talk about micro credentials. And then that should be December 18th. So that's my apologies when I was making that. But our final webinar for the 2021 will be our early efforts strengthening partnerships between school districts and community-based childhood providers. I would be remiss if I didn't mention, though, that we do have a January post-secondary webinars topic coming up on January 13th at 2 p.m. We're going to be discussing vaccine mandates on college campuses and in states to understand how that's affecting college students. So we hope that you will join us for that. Again, want to say thank you to our panelists. You were amazing. And feel free to reach out if you ever need anything from the Hunt Institute. We're here to support. So thank you, everyone, and I hope you have a great Thursday.